He is my radio dad, and man, does he sport that fedora nicely. He is a man who single-handedly keeps the United States Postal Service in business with his lust for writing letters. It is the great Andy Furman, Fox Sports radio host. He is on Twitter at Andy Furman FSR. Dad, it is great to reunite with you. I know we do some work on Sunday mornings on FSR as I get to fill in as your anchor from time to time, but it's good to see you in a different light, a different medium of media.
I got to tell you right now, it's about time. It's about time, because I've seen you've done 5,000 of these interviews, and you're probably scraping for someone to do one right now. So that's why I'm here, but it's okay. I'll take it because I'm free. You call me at a free moment.
Well, here's the thing, Andy. I've already had you on. You might have forgotten that because we did talk a little bit about UCLA and your relationship with Mick Cronin. So don't think that I've forgotten about you. That is not the case. And by the way, I am so proud of you because all of your adult education computer classes have really turned out, because I did not know if you knew what Zoom was when we did this interview. I did not know if you knew how to turn a computer on, and you have surprised me, and I'm so proud of you.
Well, I have to make a confession. I Googled it.
Okay, you did.
No, I've done this before.
Yeah.
Just because I write letters, and I know my wife tells me all the time that writing letters makes me look old. And I'll say this. If people get 30, 40, 50 emails a day, and some go in trash and some go in spam, when you get a letter, you're alone. Not many people write letters anymore. So I think it's a great way to get on someone's desk.
Who was the person that you felt like it was the biggest reach to reach out to as far as them responding, the biggest name, and they actually did with a handwritten note?
Well, Bill Belichick did, and I had him on Fox Sports Radio about a year ago, and I know he doesn't do many interviews, so that was big, and he appreciates it. I write him, and he always writes me back handwritten notes. Bobby Knight, way back in the day when I was in Brooklyn, I used to write for a weekly newspaper in Brooklyn, and he was coaching Army. And I'd write to him all the time. And then when I moved to the Midwest and he was coaching Indiana, I did a sports talk show on WLW radio. Again, he never did any other interviews except his coach's show. He told me that, he'd go on with me. Here are the ground rules. No phone calls, a half hour, that's it, no commercials. And we did it every year.
Andy Furman is with us, Fox Sports Radio host. I'm Bryan Fenley, a Fox Sports Radio anchor. If you had Bill Belichick on now and you told him your theory about Julian Edelman being the next quarterback for the Patriots, what in the world would his response be?
He'd either do one of two things: laugh and urinate in his pants, or hang up on me. I think he'd respect me for thinking that way because he thinks outside the box too. But, I did say that prior to Cam Newton. And I don't think it's that far-fetched. It really wasn't. But I gotta live with it. When people like you just keep on banging me with this thing, it's okay. I can handle it. I got big shoulders. I really do.
Well, maybe mentally, but doesn't look like physically. And I think behind you, is that a portrait of you doing some harness racing? I'm trying to see behind that large fedora of yours.
Yeah, it is not.
Yeah, but you're a guy that likes to go rogue with some of these sports theories. I mean, you said that Louisville is going to be the next home for an NBA team. And you know what? You might be the only person that ever thinks that, but we support you anyway. We love you for who you are, Andy. And your intuition from the start, how did you end up getting into the caverns of radio?
It's a strange story. It really is. I mean, I was always a PR guy in sports. I worked at various colleges. I worked as a PR guy for some sports pro teams as well. And then I got a job in radio, in radio sales. It's funny because I worked at the racetrack, and the owners of the racetrack, Delaware North Company, is based out of Buffalo, New York. They sold the racetrack where I worked at, Latonia Race Course in Florence, Kentucky, by the way, where I got married in the winner's circle there. But
did it feel like a winner's? Did now that you look back, and what was it? You just had your 36 years of marriage. Does it still feel like you hit the winner's circle with your wife?
I definitely married up. I really did. I don't know how she handles it, but the good news is she never listens to me on the radio, which is great. So, I worked there, and they sold the racetrack. When they sold it, I was offered a job, believe it or not, as a sports director at the local NBC affiliate in Cincinnati, which I knew nothing about television, really. But I did it, and the general manager said, look, if you don't like this, after 6 months, come to my office, and we'll figure something out. So after 6 months, I went to his office and said, look, I work 8 hours a day for 2 minutes on the air. It's crazy. It's like a baby
Yeah.
eating its young. So he put me in sales. And at that point in time, that station, the NBC affiliate, had the Cincinnati Reds baseball games over the air. So he gave me a telephone book, and he says, go ahead and sell. So I sold, and I made a sale, which was like finding a needle in a haystack. I sent a note to P&G, which is based in Cincinnati, to a product called Top Job. It's a female product. I never thought they would sponsor a male-oriented baseball, but
Mhm.
Top Job, which is stove cleaner. And I said, we ought to have the Top Job of the Game award. Well, the manager of Top Job called me to her office, and lo and behold, behind her desk, there was a picture of Paul O'Neill. I
Oh, wow.
knew I was in. And she says, how much is this deal going to cost? And I couldn't get it out, but I finally did. I says, $165,000. She agreed. I went back. It was a big deal. And then next thing I know, I got a phone call from the general manager of the local radio station, WLW, which carried the Reds games. I told my wife I'm going to be working for WLW. She said, how do you know? I said, well, general manager wants to take me out for lunch. He doesn't know me. He's not going to fire me. Usually when the general manager takes you out for lunch, he's going to hire you or fire you. So he hired me, and he let me sell Reds baseball for the radio, and he put me on a Sunday morning show with a couple of guys, a Sunday morning sports talk, and that evolved into a nighttime show, which I worked with Chris Collinsworth for a while. So it worked out very well.
How has your background in sales helped you kind of deliver that edge to how you like to carry yourself on the radio, and gives you a spunk, a different perspective than others?
I think that there's a euphoric feeling when you make a sale. It really is. I mean, you call people, you can make 40, 50 calls a day. And if you make 50 calls a day, 45 won't return your call, and 3 or 4 of them will say no. And then finally, you just want to get belly to belly and meet somebody. So I think sports talk radio is very similar in the sense that you're attacking an item, you're attacking a
Mm.
subject matter, and you want to try to get it top to bottom, every layer of that topic as you can. A lot of layers to topics. I listen to a lot of sports talk on the radio, and I hear topics such as a player signs with the team. Well, that's great. But what's the layer? Why did he sign? What do they give up for him? What is he going to do for that team? There's a lot of layers underneath the initial story.
Yeah, and there's a lot of layers to your notes that you take for every show. I mean, so much so that, look, anybody that's had an 8th grade earth science textbook, Andy Furman's notes per show is more wordier than anything you'd read in an 8th grade textbook. That's what you do, Andy. That is your MO. How about your most celebrated radio moment?
Well, I think it's a funny story. Way back when I was on WLW radio, and one of my first sponsors was a man by the name of Ron Juergens. Never forget him. And he owned a company called Stacy Storage and Moving, a moving company. And he loved fishing. And one Sunday morning, he called me up. He was fishing with the late Ted Williams. And he put Ted Williams on the radio with me. So that was
Oh,
wonderful. But
wow.
to have the opportunity to speak with people like Ted Williams, Serena Williams, and even to this day, I'm friends, and I can consider him a friend, Pete Rose, because when I worked at the racetrack, he was there every night. So Pete Rose was a tremendous friend. He'd come on the radio with me all the time. So just meeting people like that was a thrill. You know, you talk to a lot of people, a lot of athletes, but there are certain athletes that just go to the next level. And even Oscar Robertson, who I consider a friend, those guys, like you look at them in awe. They're just different type of individuals. You really respect them, honor them, and almost worship them.
You, like you said, have a long background in horse racing. When you got married in the paddock at the Winter Circle, was horse racing really kind of a theme to your wedding? Like, was a horse your best man? Like, did a horse officiate your wedding? I mean, how devout were you in making this a horse racing themed wedding?
Well, it wasn't so much of a horse racing theme. We had a staff meeting in late July, early August, because our opening night was September the 6th.
Mm-hmm.
And the general manager went around the room and he says, what are we going to do for opening night, for an opening night promotion? And like the fool that I am, I blurted out, I said, I'll get married. And he looked at me and says, really? I said, yeah. And I told my wife to be this. And she freaked. She was great. She said no. She didn't say no, but she really hustled and got everything together for the wedding. She got a string quartet. She got the limos. She got everything going on. And then the hardest part was to find a rabbi to perform the ceremony.
Sure.
I went to various synagogues in and around Cincinnati, and I finally found one, Rabbi Solomon Greenberg. And after we got married, his son called me up and he says, I told my dad his name was in Sports Illustrated, because the wedding ceremony was in the scorecard section of Sports
Wow.
Illustrated, as well as various AP reports all over the country. I got the clippings from that wedding ceremony all over the place. So Solomon Greenberg was thrilled that he was in Sports Illustrated. Probably the only time he'll ever be in Sports Illustrated.
How did you meet your wife?
I met her at the racetrack. She was
Really?
handling.
Was she
She
a
was
jockey?
handling. No, she was handling group sales, and I was the PR guy. And we met, and it just blossomed into a situation. We got married, and it worked out great. Still does.
How did you ask her out on the first date? What was your sort
You
of
know, I don't.
way of wooing her?
I really, I just think we had lunch. I said, let's have lunch one day, and that was it. And just we became great friends. We're still tremendous friends, and it just worked out that way. The spark was there, kind of like you and me. The
Yeah.
spark is there, you know.
Yes. So how does she put up with you nowadays? It's been 36 years. What does she think of you these days?
She spends a lot of time alone, which is great because I think that she knows I have a lot of idiosyncrasies. I'm one of those people that has to be doing something at all times. It's hard for me to sit down. I'm always on the go, thinking of things to do, sending out material, whatever it may be. So it's difficult at times, but we do spend time together, obviously, and we have a good time.
You've been a newsbreaker in the business. Like you are a radio host, you're a salesman, but you've had an opportunity to break a story with the whole Zach Taylor to the Bengals. That was quite the move on your part. How did that all come about and you make that happen?
That is a story within a story. Before the pandemic, I would spend a lot of time at the cigar shop in Cincinnati, Strauss Tobacconists. I talked to Oscar Robertson. They'd hang out there.
Huh?
So I was there one day, and a former Cincinnati Bengal was there that day.
Mhm.
And he told me Zach Taylor is going to be the next coach of the Bengals. And normally when I hear stuff like that from an individual, I take it with a grain of salt. But I just felt so confident that he wouldn't lead me down the road to despair. So I tweeted it out, put it on Facebook, and lo and behold, I think 48 hours later, he was named head coach. So yeah, every once in a while you get a shot. You pay dirt.
Yeah, there was a recent NFL big signing where somebody overheard somebody talking about it in a liquor store and it actually happened to work out. So, Andy, I know you're a frequent man, went out when the pandemic is not going on as far as hanging out in liquor stores and cigar shops. And look, I know you're going to break a lot of news because that's what you do. What's a funny Mike North story? You guys had a great run together. You guys are good friends and both titans in the radio industry.
Mike North, I had never met him. I've heard of him. I never met him until we worked together.
Oh, wow.
And as you mentioned, I have those War and Peace rundowns before the shows. So our first show, I typed the rundown and emailed it to Mike because he was doing the show in Chicago and I was doing the show home here in Kentucky. And he immediately called me up. He says, "Don't you dare ever send me a rundown." I said, "What?" I said, "We have to know exactly what direction we're going." And it's sort of like a map. You just map out what you're going to do in your show. No, I don't want to. And I never did send him a rundown after that. And I don't understand the logic. Look, he's knowledgeable. He's a tremendous individual. He has a wealth of sports knowledge and opinions, but you still have to know where you're going to go because he could go out in left field and whatever it might be. But he never did want a rundown, and we never did do it. But I never understand that because even on TV, news people use a teleprompter. Everybody has what I call a map or a crutch or whatever, a confidence builder before you do your work.
Yeah. When you have listeners that tune into your figurative Andy Furman restaurant and they're dining in and listening to what you're saying, what is the experience that you want to pamper and entreat them with?
Well, I've sold the restaurant since, so the Furman's Cafe is gone. But it was a great situation because I used to do a lot of my radio shows from there, and I think a lot of people came. I don't think they came because of me. I think they came because it was good food. And I think when we started the restaurant, we did something very unique. We had little TVs in every booth, which was tremendous. That was the good thing. The bad thing is people would get there early and they couldn't turn the tables over because they stayed there and watched TV all night. The basic premise of a restaurant is to have the tables turn over so you can have more business. But they'd come in there at 7, 8 o'clock and stay there till 1 in the morning at the same table, could keep on watching sports on the TV. And I think, get out. We need the table, please get out.
They were watching those TVG runs, those replays.
X-rated movies.
Yeah. Andy Furman, FSR is his Twitter. Andy Furman on Fox Sports Radio. I'm Bryan Fenley, an FSR anchor. But then, Andy, what about just like the experience overall, that like when people tune into you, what's the kind of impression that you want to give that they feel when they listen to you talk?
I want to feel as if that I'm speaking for them. I don't normally go on there with an agenda, and I want to feel as if I'm talking one on one, like I'm talking to you right now. I never want to feel as if I'm lecturing people. I talk from my gut. Sometimes I talk with my foot in my mouth as well, and I make mistakes. And we all make mistakes. I'd be the first one to say I've made a mistake, and it's not a big deal. But I think I want to come on being honest, not with an agenda. I mean, you listen to the radio today. I mean, it's all political talk, and I can't stand it. I just think that politics is a personal situation, and it should be kept at home. Politics and religion should not be brought out there because, first of all, no one cares who you're going to vote for. I don't care who you vote for, Bryan Fenley. I love you to death. I don't really care. Moreover, I think that if I went on there and spewed the fact that I'm a Democrat or a Republican, I'm going to lose half of my audience. Yeah. So it's foolish to even tell somebody who you're voting for because the name of the game in radio is ratings and revenue. And how do you get ratings? People to somewhat like you and like listening to you. If I go on there and start banging the drum for one candidate over another, I'm losing 50% of my audience. Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. What's the strongest take you've ever had on an issue that you've talked about on the radio?
I probably would think that, and I hate saying this, when you want to have a coach who's not doing well and telling the coach to get fired. And leading the charge for him to be fired. And you really can't do that on the national stage like at Fox, because if I'm talking on Fox Sports Radio and someone's listening to me in Montana, they really don't care. But if you're in a local market like in Cincinnati and you have a coach like the late Sam Weiss who wasn't doing well, and I go on the airwaves and go crazy on the guy who he didn't talk to me for a year and a half after the fact, it's difficult. It really is difficult to do that. But I think the average fan, the paying customer, the patron of the game, he appreciates that because that's the way he feels. But it's rough. And I tell you, I'm very happy in a sense that I'm not doing local radio now in Cincinnati because Buddy Bell and his son David, who manages the Reds, David Bell, who's having a tough time right now, dear friends. Buddy Bell helped me make the very first sale I ever made in television. Wow. And I could not have the heart to go on the airwaves and say David Bell should lose his job, which they're doing now in Cincinnati. It's a tough situation. It's a tough line to cross. It really is.
What's the most worked up you've ever been on the radio, whether it was interacting with a host or maybe it was a wild phone call that you took?
I think one of the biggest situations I had is when they were trying to build a new stadium in Cincinnati for the Cincinnati Bengals, Paul Brown Stadium. And they wanted to issue a tax levy and whatever. And everybody was behind it except me. And I went crazy. and I just didn't think it was right. I just didn't think it was right that the public should have to pay for a stadium. In Miami, it was built by the late Robbie family. They paid for the stadium. I don't think that the people should help public finances help private enterprise. I just think it's wrong. And I went on the airways, and there was a group that was with me, and we kind of not marched, but we had rallies or whatever. And I was called to the general manager's office. He says, if you have nothing good to say about it, as far as the stadium, don't say it anything. That was really the first time I was muzzled. I was muzzled on that deal, and obviously it passed and it went through, and that was the end of that deal. But I think today people would follow me and follow my lead because I think it was a bad deal. It may have been the worst deal in sports what the Cincinnati Bengals got. The public paid for it. They pay for everything. They pay for the electric bill. They pay for the gardening. They pay for the furniture in the stadium. Everything in that stadium is paid for by public finance.
Wow. Now, Andy, looking at your attire, it looks like you played a role in The Sound of Music. Is you playing one of those long bell horns?
The Great Gatsby.
The Great Gatsby. Did you just get off the golf course?
No, I just got out of the pool, actually. I was working out and doing some laps.
Okay, so what is your idea of working out? What does that actually mean?
I do about 25, 30 laps in the pool every day.
Really?
So, yeah. Especially now because I'm suffering a little bit with sciatica.
Okay.
It's gone really down. I'm doing really well thanks to Johnny Bench with Blue Emu because I've been using the Blue Emu now for about 2 weeks.
Okay.
And I swim every day because I looked on Google. They say you have to do stretching. So I figured what's better than swimming as far as stretching. So I'm feeling a lot better. Really, I mean, about 2 weeks ago, I was in pain.
So do you also do weights? Like, you also, okay, what do you do? Like, are you going beyond 5 pounds as far as dumbbells?
I'm almost there. See, but
Okay.
you want to put me down, it's okay. Look, it makes you feel good. It's okay. Attack me if you want to. It doesn't make a difference. I really don't care.
You're pretty good as far as off the cuff stuff on the radio. And so when you hear me, throwing a little bit of fun,
Hey, hey.
hey, yeah, I don't know how that became a thing, but you think about a tagline, and I guess that's what it is. Why do you feel like you and I have a cool little banter back and forth? Why do you think it's worked so well? Or at least I like to tell myself that. Maybe you're completely on the opposite end
Well,
of the spectrum
obviously, I
there.
mean, I think you're dreaming right now. I mean, it's something in your mind, not in mine, really.
Yes.
But that's okay. If you want to think that, great. That's okay. No, I love the people I work with. I think that if you listen to talk radio, especially on Fox Sports Radio, when it's basically a team effort, there are some times, and I don't listen all the time around the clock, but I think there's sometimes where one person wants to shine over the other person. I
Yes.
really believe that. And maybe it's subconsciously, whatever it may be, like one person thinks I'm better than you. I'm going to do this. I'm going to show you how much I know. First of all, I think in the game, and I call it a game, in the game of sports talk radio, it's not as much knowledge as you have. You don't have to know the backup quarterback on every team in the National Football League or who's playing right guard on the Los Angeles Chargers. You don't have to know that. I think you have to be a better entertainer and a
Yes.
better person of knowledge. That's
I'm
number one. Number two, I felt that maybe because of my years of experience, I'm very happy to be with you, Brian Noe, Vinay, Iowa Sam, whoever it may be, Chris P. Everybody has an equal opportunity to get involved. And I'm not saying I know more or less than anybody else, but we share. When I look at Fox Sports Radio, it's like we're at the barber shop talking together or the cigar shop and just talking sports. Now, you may look at that rundown, which is about 75 pounds of information every week, but it's just a guideline. We definitely go off that rundown many times, and we just shoot the breeze. I think that's what it's all about. Not about stats, not about records, not about who's playing whom. It's about shooting the breeze and just guys talking sports.
Yeah, who remembers stats? You remember how you felt when you were
It's
entertained by
emotional,
a
right?
story. And Brian Noe, when he came on to this podcast, he had so many nice things to say about you. And it went back to what you were saying about not feeling like one host has to steal the limelight and try to impress the other by using this bevy of information, like you said, stats and whatnot. And Brian called it like you're not, I should say, a score first point guard, in the sense that you're just as happy setting up your teammate for the slam dunk as you are. And maybe you even prefer your teammate to do that because then it makes the whole show look good. How has the relationship with Brian Noe worked so well, and that you guys seemingly have a great chemistry on Sunday mornings?
Well, chemistry is a strange word because I sometimes fill in on Fox Sports Radio with people either I've never seen or I've never worked with before. Now, this past week, I worked with Bucky Brooks for
Mm-hmm.
only the second time. I don't fear that because I know Bucky has a lot of material, a lot of knowledge, a lot of in-depth situation that I don't have, that I can have, and I think that I could be the conduit for the public to get it into Bucky and get it out. He played the game. I never played the game. So Saturday was cut down day in the National Football League, and the obvious question to ask Bucky, what is that like? You've been on 5 different teams in the National Football League. What is it like to feel the pressure of maybe getting a phone call and saying you're out of work? So that was a wonderful thing. So everybody has their, I guess, hot button to ask. I mean, Bryan Fenley, you do. Brian Noe, he's been around. He's lived in New York. He lives in Oregon right now. He's on top of the situation with the Portland Trailblazers. So everybody has their thing. As far as I'm concerned, I've been around the world, to so to speak, working in various different states. So everybody can contribute for what they have within them.
Andy Furman is with us. Follow him on the Twitter machine at Andy Furman FSR, and Andy Furman on FSR. I'm Bryan Fenley, and I'm on the Twitter
Andy
streets.
Furman FSR.
Andy Furman FSR. Andy Furman FSR. It's funny because you actually corrected me. Usually I'm the one that has to correct you when you tag others on Twitter because you keep getting them wrong. I love it. So, Andy, my final question for you, or as we sort of round this thing up, your take on a hot take. Like, what percentage of hosts do it for attention, do it to get a rise, and how many of them actually believe wholeheartedly what they're saying?
That's a great question. It really is. And I'll give you one that I just saw the other day when Steve Nash was named coach of the Brooklyn Nets. Stephen A. Smith
Oh yeah.
comes out there and says white privilege. I mean, is he for real? I mean, look, I don't think he needs the attention, but he probably thrives on the attention. I mean, everybody knows who Stephen A. Smith is. He's been around the block. However, that is a very poor statement to make without doing research. And he said that he got the job, A, white privilege, and because he had no experience. Did he do his homework? I don't think so. If we go back and look at history, Bill Russell was named the first African American coach in the National Basketball Association without any experience. He was a player coach. He was named by Red Auerbach when Auerbach retired. So do your homework, know what you're going to say, and don't say it for the sake of saying it, because he did get tons of PR on it. I don't think it's positive PR, but I think in this business, name recognition is king. And if it's good, bad, or indifferent, as long as your name is out there, maybe that's what he wants. And I can't believe that ESPN didn't smack him across the hand to say, wait a minute, back off. This was a very poor, irresponsible statement.
And you have to think, Andy, that for Steve Nash to come to Brooklyn, he had to get the okay from Kyrie Irving and Kevin
No
Durant.
doubt.
And
No
those
doubt.
two loved having him and wanted him. So if they are all for him, then I can't look at it in the way that Stephen A. looked at it. I just can't. And
I'm
I
with you.
know, Andy Furman, you're the same way.
You know, I don't dislike Stephen A. and I've listened to him, and I kind of giggle when I hear his rants. I enjoy rants, but
Yeah.
this was a bad one. This was irresponsible. That's what it was.
Andy Furman brings it strong Sunday mornings, 3 a.m. Pacific to 6 a.m. Pacific, which I believe is afternoon drive in Kazakhstan.
And
Andy,
you're supposed to visit me in Lexington. When is that
I
happening?
was, but you know what happened? The pandemic shut down some of those tennis tournaments, and so I lost the opportunity to make that happen. But hopefully next summer we
Right.
will, as we get back to a relative amount of normalcy, and hopefully, the Reds can do better than what they're doing right now. Because Andy, when are they going to be the team to live up to their name in the NL Central?
Well, it's a tough division. I'm not making any excuses, but they lose 3 out of 4. I know they split with the Pirates, and that was a bad loss Sunday. That was a real bad loss, the bottom of the ninth inning. So 5 games under 500. I like 18 games to go. It doesn't look good.
Doesn't look
Doesn't
good.
look.
That's Andy Furman. If you don't see him on the radio, he is a jockey and a man who is seen frequenting horse racetracks, wearing that polka dot garb and just riding those ponies. Andy, thanks so much for doing it. Love the fedora and love the self-portrait behind you of you. I think that was you in your 20s on a harness
Right.
race.
1820s.
1820. Well, you were still around by then and just
Yeah.
getting started.
Right. Thank you.